All right, so everyone's probably a little on edge right now waiting for tax refunds. And one of the biggest mysteries is that IRS tax transcript processing date.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to know what it means. Like, is that the day the money hits my bank account? What's the deal with this date?
Right. It's the magic number everyone's looking for. But I hate to break it to you, it's not that straightforward.
Okay, so not the golden ticket to refund land.
Not quite. It's more like the IRS's best guess of when they'll wrap up looking at your return doesn't actually guarantee when the refund's coming.
Okay, so an internal deadline for them, not for us. But why even have this date if it's not tied to the actual refund? Seems kind of confusing.
Well, think of it as a kickoff point for the IRS system. When that date hits, it sets a few things in motion.
Like what?
First off, it means they're probably done with your return, and if everything checks out, they might finally set a date to send that refund.
Got it. So that's when we actually see progress.
Yeah. But here's where it gets interesting. That date also makes the IRS post more of those transaction codes to your account.
Uh-oh, those codes. Everyone gets freaked out by those.
Right. They seem mysterious, but they're actually just clues about what's happening behind the scenes with your return. We'll break those down later, but for now, just know they give you more details about where your refund's at.
More details are always good. Anything else this date triggers?
Well, this is where things can get a little messy. This processing date can also kick off something called resequencing.
Resequencing. Sounds kind of ominous. What is that?
It's not always bad, and this is the catch. It can actually hold up your refund even after that processing date passes.
Wait, seriously. How does that even work?
Basically, the IRS might decide to move your return to a different processing group. Imagine you're waiting in line and suddenly get moved to a whole other line. Could be shorter, could be longer. You just don't know.
Oh, no. That's my nightmare. So my tax return is basically stuck playing musical chairs with the IRS.
Pretty much. And there are a few reasons they might do this. Sometimes it's just routine stuff like system updates or needing to balance out their workload.
So it's not always because I messed something up.
Not necessarily. But sometimes your return might need a little extra attention, like a review or something. That can trigger a resequencing too.
Makes sense. Got to make sure everything is legit, right? But man, I wish they were more upfront about why they do this moving around thing. Would definitely calm some nerves during tax season.
I agree. More transparency would be awesome. But for now, before we get into all the reasons for resequencing, let's talk about actually finding this date on your transcript.
Yeah, good point. Where's this thing hiding anyway?
It can feel like a treasure hunt, but it's easier than you think. First, you got to get your tax account transcript online. That's on the IRS website under Get Transcript.
Okay, got my transcript. Now, spill the beans. Where's the date?
Here's the trick. Scroll down till you find the section that says Explanation of Transactions. Then look at the date column. The very first date there, usually right next to a cycle code, that's your processing date.
So it's right there in plain sight. But remember, you said it's just an estimate, right?
Exactly. Don't freak out if it changes. Now, what jumps out at you on the transcript besides that date?
Well, there are a bunch of other dates listed under that main processing date. What are those about?
Those are what we call transaction processing dates. And they're super useful. Think of them like a step-by-step record of everything that happens with your return. They show exactly when things occurred, like when your refund was actually issued or if you filed an extension, stuff like that.
Okay, so these are different from that big processing date at the top. I'm a little lost.
Yeah, these transaction processing dates are specific to each little action and they don't change, unlike that main processing date, which can move around, as we've said.
So one's the big picture estimate and the others are like timestamps for each step.
Perfect way to put it. And you know those transaction codes we talked about? They add even more detail to the story.
Ooh, getting juicy now.
Right. But before we get into those codes, let's unpack what can cause those processing dates to shift and why your return might get shuffled around like that.
All right, let's get to the bottom of this resequencing mystery.
Let's do it.
Okay, so we found that processing date. Now let's talk about those transaction codes. They're like a whole secret language the IRS uses.
Yeah, they can be a little confusing. Each code is like a little breadcrumb telling you a specific action the IRS has taken on your return.
All right, so we're playing detective here. Follow the IRS's trail of breadcrumbs. Which codes should we be on the lookout for? Like, what are the most important ones?
Well, the holy grail, the one everyone wants to see, is code 846.
846. What's so special about that one?
That one tells you your refund has been approved and it's actually scheduled to be released.
So that's the money's coming code.
Yeah.
What other codes should we know?
You'll probably see code 150. That one's pretty basic. Just means your tax return's been filed. You might also see codes related to your W-2s, 1099s, that sort of thing.
So they're saying, hey, we got your income info.
Exactly. They're showing you they've processed that part of your return.
I'm starting to feel like I can actually understand what's happening with my return by looking at these codes. It's like a behind-the-scenes peek.
That's the idea. It gives you a little more transparency into the whole process.
Speaking of transparency, let's go back to that resequencing thing. You said it's not always bad news, but it's still kind of scary to think my return could get moved around without me knowing why.
I get it. It would be nice if the IRS gave us more info about why they do it, right?
For sure. So for now, let's break it down. Why would the IRS resequence a return? What are the most common reasons?
Well, sometimes it's just routine stuff, like they might need to do system updates or they're trying to balance out their workload, so they move returns around.
So it's not always because I messed up on my return.
Nope, not always. Sometimes it's totally out of your control. But there are other times when resequencing might happen because your return needs a closer look.
Okay, like if I claim something that needs more documentation.
Exactly. Or maybe there's a mismatch between what you reported and what the IRS has on file.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So if there's anything that might raise a red flag, they might pull my return for a closer look, and that could lead to resequencing.
Right. And if you filed a paper return, processing usually takes longer anyway, so there's a higher chance of a manual review, which again could lead to resequencing.
So filing electronically is probably the way to go if you want to avoid delays.
Definitely streamlines the process. Less chance of errors, and it generally moves faster.
Right. This is all starting to make more sense now. It's like a whole system of checks and balances, right?
You got it. They want to make sure everything is accurate and fair.
Speaking of systems, what about these cycle codes I see in my transcript? What are those all about?
Think of them as internal tracking codes. It's how the IRS sorts and manages all those millions of tax returns.
So it's their way of keeping things organized.
Exactly. Each cycle code represents a different processing path. They assign your return to a specific cycle based on things like when you filed, how complex your return is, that kind of thing.
So it doesn't really tell me anything about when I'll get my refund, but it's just part of their internal system.
Pretty much. Think of it like a secret code that only the IRS understands.
Okay, back to that processing date one more time. We know it can change, but is there anything on the transcript that can give us a hint about whether it's likely to change? Or are we just totally in the dark?
Honestly, there's no surefire way to predict it.
So no secret formula to crack the code of our refund destiny.
I wish. But there are a few things to keep in mind. If your return is pretty simple, you didn't claim anything unusual, and you filed electronically, chances are your processing date will probably stay the same.
So keep it simple, file online, and hope for the best.
Pretty much. But even then, sometimes things happen that are totally out of your control. The IRS might have system updates, or their workload might change, and that can trigger resequencing even for simple returns.
All right, so no guarantees then. But at least we're starting to understand the system a little better, right?
Absolutely. You know, it sounds simple, but the biggest thing is just making sure you file accurately and on time.
Yeah, everyone says that. But how does that actually relate to this processing date we've been talking about?
Well, think about it. Any mistake on your return, even a little one, can cause the IRS to take a second look. And that can lead to, you guessed it, resequencing and delays.
So basically double check everything before hitting submit.
Exactly. And if you really want to speed things up, file electronically and choose direct deposit for your refund.
Makes sense. Less paperwork, faster money. Now, what about checking my transcript? Once I've filed, am I allowed to, obsessively check it for updates?
I know it's tempting, but honestly, checking it every 5 minutes won't make things move any faster. That processing date, remember, it's an estimate. Things can change.
So, patience is key. Easier said than done when you're waiting for that refund. But what happens if the processing date comes and goes and still no refund? What should I do then?
At that point, it's totally reasonable to reach out to the IRS. Give them a call or use their website to check your refund status. They can usually give you more info.
Okay, so don't panic, but don't be afraid to ask questions. You know, it's crazy how much we've learned about this one little date on the tax transcript. It's like a whole world of information hidden in there.
I know, right? And once you understand it, it really can make you feel more in control of the whole tax process.
Definitely. We've decoded the processing date, those transaction codes, even talked about cycle codes and resequencing. I feel like we can all go forth and conquer tax season now.
That's the goal. Remember, knowledge is power when it comes to taxes.
Absolutely. Well, I think we've cracked the code of the IRS tax transcript processing date. Thanks for joining us. Hope everyone feels a little more prepared to tackle their taxes now.
My pleasure. Good luck with your returns, everyone.
And may your refunds be swift and plentiful. See you next time.